Thai Airways has come to the rehabilitation plan since 2022. At the time, the COVID situation is intensifying and the travel industry is in downturn. The airline has implemented its reforms, including cutting staff by half and also selling off assets like buildings and also aircraft. And in heavy negotiation with creditors. Let's find out how the plan's going, anything to worry about, or anything is going as planned, and for the prospect for the next future. Thank you for joining us, Voice of the Nation, today. I really like to know the overall pictures of your rehabilitation plan. Is it going slow or is it going as planned?
In general, it's going as planned. We had been implementing various reforms since Thai Airways filed for rehabilitation
in 2020.
In 2020, yes. At the end of May 2020. Since then, we had been implementing various reforms, and the reforms continued after the court approval of the plan and the establishment of the plan administrator. So far, I think we had been making good progress on most fronts. Maybe in some areas, the progress has been a bit slow.
Can you elaborate the areas that been slowing? It's just like selling the aircraft or negotiating with the trades?
Let's begin with the areas where we had been able to successfully implement the reforms. The first area would be the people area. We have been able to reduce the staff in Thai Airways from 29,500 at the end of 2019 down to about 14,500 at the moment. Now this includes outsourcers and staff of Thai Smile and also TG staff abroad. So that's down by about 50%. And we had been able to do that fairly smoothly, thanks to the fact that most Thai employees who left had been very kind to the company, and that is they had been able to, they took the package of mutual separation program. And the mutual separation program is actually not all that generous. It's simply more or less in line with the labor law. But we have additional payment of maybe half a month or 1 month. But the payment is not immediate. The payment is in installments over approximately 1 year. According to labor law, you have to pay upfront immediately. But we don't have money. We don't have enough cash for that. And that's why we had to pay gradually over 1 year. So that is something we really have to thank the Thai employees who had left the company. The pay, the salary had come down very substantially. Before rehabilitation, the salary payment was approximately 2,600 million baht per month. Now it's down to about 600 or 700 million baht per month. Down very substantially. And we had also restructured the payment system, the overtime, the various rules and regulations related to the workforce to be in line with the labor law. Benefits had come down very substantially. So that is the first area I think we had been successful in implementing the reform. We had also been negotiating with the aircraft lessors, and we had been able to reduce the rent quite substantially. What we did was to evaluate the economics of keeping the aircrafts by looking at the lease payment which we are getting from the lessor, the reduction in the lease payment, and also the economics of the aircraft itself, fuel consumption, maintenance costs, and so on. And in the end, we decided to keep 58 aircrafts in our fleet. There will be 3 more coming in the next few months. So all in all, this year there should be 61 aircrafts in operation. These will be all relatively new aircraft, new generation, like 787, A350s, and also the narrow body A320. And we had retired old aircrafts. Actually, some of these aircrafts should have been retired quite some time ago, like the A340s, these Boeing 747s, Boeing 737, A300, 600. So the old aircrafts which consume a lot of fuel are now being retired. Actually, they haven't been flying for quite some time, so we will have to dispose of them. So that is in the process of implementation. The lease payment had come down, as I said, quite substantially, and we had been able to structure the lease payment in such a way that in the initial period, we pay by the hour. If we don't use the aircraft, we don't have to pay for the rent. But after that, it will be flat rate per month. But again, the amount had come down very substantially. We had also renegotiated the various maintenance contracts, so that had been able to save us quite a lot of money. So these are some examples of the reforms we had been doing. And actually they are all in the reform plan and a part of the rehabilitation plan. Apart from that, we had to sell off some of the assets. The thing is, even if the cost has come down, but because of COVID, we cannot fly. The level of passengers we are carrying is negligible compared with the level before COVID. But there are fixed costs which we still have to pay. Last December was the best year after COVID, you know, because after the implementation of Thailand Test and Go program, with just 1 day quarantine, we saw passenger numbers going up tremendously. But again, the international passenger in December was only about 2,500 passengers per day. And if you add onto that Thai Smile, total passenger was about 10,000 passengers per day. So that was still 20% of the level before COVID. But again, that was still the best month since COVID. As a result, each month there was outflow of money, net outflow of money of about 1,000 million baht. And that's why we had to sell some of the unused assets. We haven't been getting any new funding from banks or the government, which is a pain really, which forces us to sell some of the assets. You know, some other airlines, Singapore Airlines, Lufthansa, had been getting very substantial injection from their respective governments. Thai Airways had not been able to get a single baht from the government. So we had been selling unused land, some of the offices, shares in some companies. In total, we had sold off about 8,000 million baht of assets. With 50% less staff, obviously we don't need that many buildings. That's why we were able to sell the office at Lan Luang, at Lac Si, and even here at the head office, we are actually in the process of renting out some of the buildings. Even this building, some of the floors will be rented out because there are less staff. So the sale of assets had been able to keep cash flow at a reasonable level. There are still assets overseas which we are in the process of disposing. Aircraft sales have been slow, and that is because of the process of getting approval from the Transport Ministry. But we have been able to sign quite a number of contracts with the buyers already, but it's simply that the money is not coming in yet. Hopefully everything will be cleared and we will be able to get sale from aircrafts to boost liquidity.
In usual time, usually if we want to sell aircraft, it will take like 2-3 months or half a year in the usual time without COVID and this financial pressure.
No, in the normal time, if you sell aircraft, you will be able to get a better price, obviously. But now there is excess supply of aircraft worldwide. Obviously, selling aircraft is actually more difficult. But we had changed the process of selling aircrafts so that it's more transparent. We have more interested buyers coming in. And we were actually quite surprised that some of the aircrafts we had been able to get fairly good prices, more than what we had expected. But obviously, there are still some aircrafts which we have not been able to sell.
The plan to keep the types of aircraft to 3 types will help a lot with the engines, also the maintenance.
Oh yes, that will help tremendously because it reduces the operating cost, maintenance cost, and so on, and also adds flexibility to the fleet. So at the moment, what we have is Boeing 777-300ER, Boeing 777-200ER, A350, Boeing 787, and A320s.
Let me go back to your workforce a little bit. It seemed like very successful to cut by half. And for this year, you're going to continue to cut the number of staff?
We had really more or less finished the cutting of staff. Maybe a few more remains because there are some staff who we had retained on a short-term basis for 1 year, for example, and their contracts will be expiring in the middle of this year. So some of these will have to leave. But again, they had already agreed to leave the company. There are a few more, I think, staff in overseas stations which have not left yet, but the process has begun to negotiate for them to leave.
I see. And you're talking about the best month for Thai Airways is December. You see the passenger picking up from January this year?
You see, between January and October of last year, we had approximately 300 or 350 passengers per day on Thai Airways, not including Thai Smile. And then the government introduced test and go, 1-day quarantine, and immediately we saw passengers number jumping up to 1,000 per day in November, then 2,559 per day in December. Then the government canceled test and go, and immediately we saw passenger numbers coming down sharply. The average number of passengers in January and February was 20% lower than in January. Now the good thing is that once the government introduced test and go again, effective on the 1st of March, we had seen passenger numbers going up again. The first 7 days of March, the average passenger per day is actually higher than in December. And I just hope that this will continue. And we look at the advance booking for March and April, the numbers look actually quite optimistic. The thing is, for passengers to come into Thailand must open up. With 7-day quarantine, with complicated procedures, no one will want to come. But 1-day quarantine is more acceptable. So immediately you see passengers coming. But at the same time, the other end must open up as well. If the other end doesn't open up, then we don't see passengers coming. But European countries had opened up. Most of them had opened up. Switzerland, England, Nordic countries, Germany had opened up for quite some time. No quarantine. And that's why most of the passenger numbers had been actually from these countries to Thailand and vice versa. Italy just opened up, maybe one of the last countries in Europe to open up with no quarantine. So I hope that there will be more passengers coming. But unfortunately, the Asian countries had not opened up.
I see.
Well, most of them had not opened up. There are a few countries who had opened up a bit. Singapore, you have some opening up, but not much. Malaysia, hopefully there will be some relaxation. India, has just introduced travel bubble between Thailand and India, and I'm optimistic that we will see passenger numbers coming up tremendously. I think people had been waiting to travel between Thailand and India for quite some time. Now with 1 day quarantine or no quarantine, now we will see passengers coming. But unfortunately, Japan, Korea, China, we still see severe restrictions. So passenger numbers are not going up. And there are various restrictions. For example, how many passengers we can carry per flight to Japan, how many passengers per week, that sort of thing. And so for these routes, we have to rely mainly on cargo. Without cargo, we would have been making enormous losses.
I see.
This year, in our plan, we hope to open up more routes as European countries open up. So flights to Europe will probably begin gradually to go back to normal like before COVID. We are not counting on China. So if China opens up, that will be the upside for us.
I see. So with the changing in the travel industry environment, so it affects a lot of our flights and route plans. So you think that when in the third or fourth quarters, the situation will be improved, or it's just like we have to wait for next year?
I hope that various countries will gradually open up, like what had happened in Europe. And we had seen signs that Asian countries are opening up. So that should help us to gradually increase our flights. Australia just opened up. Australia is a big market, and that's why we are increasing flights to Sydney, and we will be resuming flights to Melbourne during the beginning from the last week of March.
Let me go back to a little bit with the challenge to have new funds, because the government doesn't help Thai Airways at all, and Thai Airways proven that we have successful area for restructuring plan. So you think that any chance for the funding to help the cash flow in the future?
And we are negotiating with banks. The government had made very clear that they will not be able to inject new cash into Thai Airways. In the rehabilitation plan, which was actually agreed with the government, when we submitted the plan in March of last year, it was stated that 25,000 million baht would come from banks. 25,000 million baht would come from the government, or loans guaranteed by the government. That was something which was agreed with the government at the highest level. But then somehow it didn't turn up.
Right.
The part of the government doesn't come, and it doesn't look as if it will be coming. So we looked at our cash flow, we looked at what we had been doing. We had been able to cut the cost quite substantially, and decided that 25,000 million baht from banks should be sufficient. And so we are amending the plan so that we would not require 25,000 million baht from the government. We have to amend the plan because in the plan, anybody who puts in new cash will be able to convert debt into equity at 2.54 baht per share. The par value is 10 baht. So that, I think, is something which is quite attractive for the new lenders, or the lenders who put in new cash. So the plan will have to be amended. Okay, so the first amendment is loan from banks of 25,000 million baht, and they will retain the right to convert debt into equity. But we are also looking at further debt conversion, debt to equity, because at the end of last year, according to the financial statement, net equity is still minus 71 billion baht. You can't operate a company
Right.
successfully. If the equity is still negative like this, you can't leave the rehabilitation plan unless the equity becomes positive. And that's why in the amendment, we are also going to propose further raising of capital. The first part would be to convert debt of existing creditors into equity, including the finance ministry. The finance ministry will be allowed an option to do that. If that is what they wish, they can do it. If they don't want that, that's up to them.
So this
And,
deal,
and hopefully, I think another important part would be to raise new cash through offering to existing shareholders, and that should help Thai Airways back on its feet sooner than we had expected, so that net equity will become positive, so that the shares will resume trading in the stock exchange maybe in a few years' time.
could you please explain me more about the debt equity situation now?
At the end of 2020,
2020.
equity was minus
Right.
128,000 million baht because we had accounting profit last year of over 50,000 million baht. Equity became just minus 71 million baht at the end of 2021. So that means that increasing equity by about, let's say, 80,000 million baht should be able to help Thai Airways to have positive equity in the next few years. And that's why in the amendment of the rehabilitation plan, we are going to propose some changes in the capital structure.
Right.
Well, first part, which is the same as before, is that those who put in new money will be able to convert debt into equity. So that's 25,000 million baht. The second part is a change, which is allowing existing creditors who have not put money into the company to convert debt into equity as well. Now the third part, which I think is important but still under discussion, is to allow existing shareholders to buy new shares. And that is an important part because it will allow Thai Airways to have positive equity in the next 2 years, and thereby allowing the company shares to resume trading in the stock market in 2,568.
I see. With your background in the energy, can you give me the picture of the oil price now? Any effect and impacts on Thai Airways?
Certainly, it has impact on Thai Airways, because each $1 per barrel increase in the price of oil increases our cost by 10 million baht per month. $10, that would be 100 million baht per month. Last year, the average bill for oil was 25% of our total income. In January, it went up to 30%. And I suspect that it will become even more. We haven't been able to do any hedging, unfortunately, because we don't have enough credit to carry out any hedging or risk management. So I suppose that the only way would be to adjust the fuel surcharge, which we are watching very closely.
I see. And the crisis in Russia and Ukraine also any impact with us?
Not directly, maybe indirectly. Not directly because we are not flying to Moscow. We are not flying to Ukraine. And we had avoided the Ukraine airspace for for quite some time. Maybe we just move away from that area a little bit, so that will add maybe 5 or 10 minutes at time to the flight to Europe. So that is probably relatively small. But so far we haven't seen impacts on passenger numbers between Thailand and Europe.
Right. For my one last question, because people believe in Thai Airways, you are the national flag carriers. Can you give one last words that to tell the creditors, the passengers, and also the people, other stakeholders with Thai Airways about along this way from now on until the end of the year and the prospect for next year?
I'm pretty sure that Thai Airways will eventually become profitable because we had cut so much cost.
Right.
The cost cutting is enormous. If we resume our flights to the normal level, the amount of cost cutting we had implemented would amount to about 50,000 billion baht per year. And we see prospects now very clearly that various countries are now opening up. Thailand is opening up. Other countries are gradually opening up. So that means that Thai Airways would become profitable again, I think probably next year. This year, there are still problems with COVID, so I don't expect profit this year, but the loss would be a lot less. So I'm sure that the new injection of 25,000 billion baht would be sufficient for us to continue the services and operation and be able to leave the rehabilitation plan probably earlier than what we had earlier expected, and the shares resumes trading the stock market in 3 years' time.
Right.
Now the government says that Thai Airways must remain a flag carrier, the national carrier. But beautiful word is not enough, if it's not supported by any action. For Thai Airways to remain a flag carrier, the government shareholding must be at a certain level. If the government doesn't do anything, makes absolutely no decision at all, the shareholding of the government will go down to a very small number. I can't see how Thai Airways can become national carrier if that is the case. So there are things the government must make decision for the first time since we entered rehabilitation. And I hope that the government will make decisions on its part on what it should be doing so that we remain national carrier,
Right.
as the Prime Minister had repeated so many times.
Right. Thanks so much for joining us today ครับขอบคุณมากครับ
Vikram.
ครับ